Good morning. You're listening to Drinking Socially, the official Untappd podcast.
Your inside look into what's happening in the Untappd community and the world of beer.
I'm John, and NASA is searching for planets orbiting faraway stars in farther away galaxies for what? The Goldilocks Zone is the term that kind of describes a place or a planet in an orbit where life can form. Now, why is all this important? Well, because water is important on a planet for life to form. And maybe more importantly, water is key in forming beer as we know it. So tune in to this episode 15 as Harrison answers questions about water's very important role in every beer you've ever drank.
That's right. And I'm Harrison. Moisture is the essence of wetness. We all know Derek Zoolander said that, and he wasn't wrong. The greatest thinkers of our time have ruminated on water since ruminating was a thing. And today we're going to continue that tradition and get knee deep in the role water has in brewing beer while drinking some awesome lagers from two breweries I love that really are kind of making some waves in a pool that not too long ago was only accessible to legendary German brewers steeped in tradition. So I say cannonball, let's get on in there. But first, Drinking Socially is released every other Wednesday morning. It can be found at podcast.untappd.com.
Or wherever you listen to podcasts. And also check us out on Twitter at That Beer Podcast. You can get more of Harrison's water puns there.
Oh, man, that was a lot of them. I was drowning there at the end. Oh, there he is. All right. My goodness. Enough of that nonsense. Let's get to some weekend catch up, which, as we say, every episode is our new favorite thing. It's not really new anymore, but it's still a favorite thing to hear kind of what you've been up to, John. And so, yeah, what's been happening lately in the beer world and your beer journey in particular?
Yeah, every weekend is a new excuse to. Now I'll leave those alone. I'm not quite as good at that as you are. So, my weekend. So, the most previous weekend that I recall as you're listening to this episode, the big one was 4th of July weekend. And for me, that was really special because I took an extra day off. So, man, it's so nice of a treat. It was Friday night. I could drink an extra couple of beers Saturday night and then Sunday night as well. I've been working really hard on a local keg that I bought from a brewery here in Wilmington. And I've never checked into one beer so many times, but it's been a fun challenge, and I understand how people can do that, especially if you have a keg of it at home. But the big one for me, I finally cracked open. I had a 2017 Dark Star from Fremont. It was the Spice Wars edition. We were playing Dungeons and Dragons about a weekend ago, this was like the perfect. It was 14%. Aged in wax, which sometimes is a pain in the butt when you're trying to open it in a hurry, but it aged beautifully. It tasted amazing. It was a perfect sipper for like 3 hours of just pretending to do things in imagination land. That was great.
That sounds amazing.
Probably another one that I think is worth mentioning, just because it's kind of a rarity for me on 4th of July weekend. Serendipitously, I noticed that almost every beer I drank that weekend was red, which it might have been patriotic. It was probably a love of fruited sours, but I cracked open a can. It was called We Met on the Internet from Something Brewery. That's their name. Good luck Googling them. But you will find them on Untappd. For me, what was really cool is that I only had 2 Untappd friends that had that before. So cheers to you, Jared and Steven, who's actually the head brewer at Little Brother Brewing in Greensboro. Those are the only 2 people that had checked into that beer. And usually I go right to my friends to see, if it's a beer I've never had before, I want to see what they thought. So between Jared and Steven, I had some great feedback. And even now it's only been about a week and I've up to 4 friends that have had that beer.
Nice.
Cheers, keep drinking Untappd.
Right. It's out there in the world, I guess. That's awesome. That's great. Yeah, me too. Right to the friends and kind of see what's what and then go from there.
Absolutely. What about you, Harrison? I know you generally appreciate your 4th of July weekends in the form of 80s movies and Narragansett.
That's right.
What'd you get into recently? Any good beers?
That happened. We watched Jaws night 1, and then had some Gansets and a lot of grilling and barbecuing and lots of food. It was exhausting, the amount of eating that happened. That's kind of what you're supposed to do, and lots of fireworks and all that cool stuff. But when it came to beer, along with Narragansett, I've been drinking a lot from Wise Man Brewing. They're out of Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and not just the Conceited Genius 2.0. Their New England IPA that I had during our live event on the Facebook group, but their pale ale as well. They have a hazy pale ale called Chosen Vehicle that's amazing. It features Galaxy hops, which I think that's an awesome hop. The first time I ever had it was in a pale ale just called Galaxy from New England Brewing Company, and it was amazing. And so maybe I'm a little biased, but I think that hop is best served in a pale ale. I think it just allows it to kind of shine through. Whereas if it was an IPA, there'd be more of it, and it can kind of get a little crazy and overpowering at that point. But anyway, this is a perfect showcase for that hop. That's really, really one that I've loved from the first time I had it with that Galaxy Pale Ale now a couple years ago. So that was kind of the highlight of the weekend, being able to sit back and enjoy a 4-pack of that across the course of it. And then really, in terms of my beer brain, it's been with all this Brewing 101 we've been doing on the podcast, kind of that homebrew itch is there in my life again. And I've been doing some research on what can I do to spin that back up and find some room to store even more beer related things in my house, which there is no room to do, but that's why they have shelves and technology and sheds you can buy or build for hobbies like that. So keep tabs on that, or maybe I'll keep you guys up to date if I make some ridiculous purchase and all of a sudden have some kind of steampunk home brewery in my backyard. It may happen. We'll see. But that's kind of where what I was up to.
That's awesome. I'm excited to talk more about home brewery. It was home brewing, I should say. It was too late for me to make that a goal for 2020 to really dive into that. But well, as a tag along, I would love to help you mash in sometime for season 4 of Drinking Socially, and do some homebrew. I don't know, talk to you guys that listen, maybe organize some sort of digital homebrew challenge, or maybe not a challenge, just a way to share recipes and stuff. I think that'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah, let us know if you're doing that already. You guys in the group or listen to the podcast, you can hit us up on all our social media. Like I said, John said, we're on Twitter now, That Beer Podcast. So find us there. And yeah, let us know if you guys are already doing this stuff and have some kind of recipe exchange program. Love to hear about it and talk about it if you are.
Absolutely. And so I'm I got to stop thinking about it because we're going to open a beer, but I want to figure out a way to use Untappd's homebrew site to share some of these with each other, or maybe much like All Together or Black is Beautiful, like create a recipe and have everybody in the podcast group brew it. And see how it turns out. We almost did that with your pumpkin beer last Halloween. I think I can't remember who, but I think it was only one person that put a picture up on Facebook. So we'll try again. We'll go big next season.
Right.
But for the first beer tonight,
yes, let's get in.
Yeah, I'm excited. I've never had this before. Every time I have a beer from Night Shift, it's usually quite a treat. And this comes to us from a good friend of mine and yours, Harrison, Robbie.
That's right.
Hooper. Robbie's actually from the area where Night Shift comes from. He helped me get my first Jack's Abbey beer. Thanks for sharing this one with us, Robbie.
Yeah, thank you, Robbie. You're a good man, and I'm pumped to jump into this beer. So I likewise have not had it, but everything I've had from Night Shift has been great. So pumped. There it is.
Also really appreciate that it's in a can, because oftentimes I forget to go grab a bottle opener in the middle of the show.
Yep.
So this beer, the specs, Night Heavy from Night Shift Brewing, is an American lager. It is gold, bold, and pure American lager. It's kind of the tagline on here. It pours honey gold with a pillowy white head. Aromas of, I love this, cereal and lemon citrus.
Yes.
I'm in love already. It sips smooth and refreshing with notes of barley, malt, and honey, light-bodied with a crisp carbonation that rolls off the tongue. I've already got a handful of friends on Untappd that I see that have checked into this beer. It comes in at 5%. For me, that's a little bit high for most of the lagers I had, but I'm not angry about that at all.
Right.
But 5 would have been probably more than I expected, even in a pale ale sometimes. And I'm curious to see how this tastes, so I'll shut up and pour it.
Yeah, but it looks super light. It's crystal clear. I have my Night Shift pint glass as well to accompany me on this journey. Big old fluffy head that dissipates pretty quick, but I got the cereal and like honey pop right away. It almost smells like Kolsch's we've had in the past. It's actually, I'm getting like a hit of Gaffel Kolsch and stuff almost, which.
Yep. The cereal the cereal is like all I can smell on the
Yeah.
aroma here. It's
Let's get
maybe a
those.
little bit of lemon. I guess if you just handed it to me, I'd probably say it smells like beer. But knowing
Right.
kind of having a hint of what I might be looking for makes it for me so much easier to just.
Get in there.
That's beautiful.
It does. It smells like summer. I'm gonna dive in. I'm going in for a dip. Ooh.
Damn, these guys are good. I get that crisp carbonation, super clean finish.
Yep. A little bit of bread there, but it's not overpowering at all, which can be the downfall of some lagers where it kind of tastes like wet bread, and this is so far from that. But the note's still in there that reminds you that it is made with grain. Much like bread.
I read honey a bunch of times in the description they give us on Untappd. I don't even remember if they said they brewed it with honey, but I 2 sips in, I can taste it. That's probably psychological, but
no, I mean, I got it. Yeah. I get it. I mean, you're right. It could be us, incepting ourselves, but I think it's there. That's a common. I feel like that's something I get in a lot of lagers. I'm kind of hunting and hoping for that. But it's like a honeyness and a nice dry kind of light floral pop that just fades away quickly, which is exactly what this is doing. And they do have. I think this beer is still on Untappd. 900 as of this podcast recording, even total check-ins. 731 unique. So 114 have been this month. So I don't think it's been around terribly long. And I could check on their page actually. And also, they also have Night Light, which is like, and then Lime Light, which is I would, which is pretty cool. So like versions, other lagers that are that they're making that are a little bit lighter, to your point, John, than this one. But man, this is good. So they're kind of getting into the lager game, but I'm kind of curious. I remember seeing Night Light come out the first time, and I was like, whoa, they're doing lagers. So yeah, Night Heavy was added to Untappd on the 23rd of March of this year. So it's only been around, as far as I can tell,
3-4 months old.
A couple, so probably plan was get this thing in here for the summer months when people are going to be wanting to hunt down lagers, and here we are.
Is Night Light?
Night Light is an American Light. Yeah, so American Light Lager is 4.3%. That would probably be like this is the way I see it is, like every big macro, brewery has like the light and the not light version.
The light and the heavy.
Right, exactly right. Exactly correct.
If they had a bunch of horses working for them, this
right. Right. I think you guys know what we're saying. So I think that's kind of the play on action, their play on words or whatever, play on this idea of having a light and then a heavy to complement it. Night Light, though, looking at other variants, they have a blood orange Night Light, a fruit punch Night Light, a lemon Night Light. So they're in on the lager bandwagon, but not just settling for we'll have a light lager. They're having a lot of fun with it, which as they do with all their beers. But and then the Lime Light as well. So this is but this is cool. I mean, this is I would be very curious to drink Night Light, because this is, tell you what, it looks very light. It tastes a little heavier than it looks, though, if that makes sense. Like, looking at it, I would think, man, this is going to be a light beer. It doesn't have that kind of like, I don't know if it's wateriness that a light beer can bring forward, but it really does taste like you're drinking kind of like a bready water sometimes. This one is, I don't know, I'm getting Kolsch like vibes from it, really.
I wanted to say earlier when you mentioned Kolsch, like I get, sorry, I get a Kolschiness, right? Forgive me for the term. But where I miss it is it doesn't bring me, usually in a Kolsch, I'll find like an appley or some sort of like fruit. And in this one, I think a big difference is like that fruit is just replaced with like biscuity, cereal-y malt flavor. But otherwise, you're right, man. It's super. I've been drinking a dry hops lager, is the local one that I have on keg, and it's amazing. It's light, crispy like a lager, but it's just packed so much with tropical citrus flavor from the dry hop that sometimes after 2 or 3, even though it's a lager, I'm like, I need some relief here.
Right. Sure.
This doesn't. It does feel heavier as it's labeled Night Heavy, but it doesn't. It doesn't bring, like, each sip I have is kind of palate cleansing in and of itself.
Yeah, as I drink it now, I'm like, the Kolschness is going away, and it's really like the bread is jumping out more, as it should for like an American style lager. This is paving the way. It's becoming more apparent as I drink it, and it kind of warms up just a tad. This would be like the beer I would drink on the boat, a go-to beer. I love that it's in a big old gold can. I
Yep.
think that's amazing. So they're definitely having fun with this, but of course filled with amazing beer. Nothing to joke about when it comes to how it actually tastes. It's so clear.
That's something we haven't drank. I'm saying this and I'm probably already wrong, but it's been a while since we've had a lager
Yeah,
on the show. And we had a Kolsch, but that was back when we were
we
in
did the
the
Maibach,
Untappd office
right?
all the time. We
Right.
did the
We did
Maibach.
the
Yep.
Maibach. That's
But
it.
it's,
That's
I mean, like I can see Robbie Hooper's check-in through this
yeah.
beer, which is a great Instagram filter as well. If you just hold it up to your screen.
There you go. I love it. Yeah, I know. But I'm pumped that we're having it kind of on the early side of it existing, because I could see this beer, even this summer alone, as it kind of gets out there a little bit more and people learn about it, being just a go-to, an easy summer go-to for a lot of people.
Yeah, especially if you're fortunate enough to live in an
Yeah,
area where Night Shift distributes. I can see this beer on Untappd. It looks like it's made it as far down as Poughkeepsie. I see it in Latham, New
nice.
York,
Yeah.
and then a bunch of mass towns that I'll pronounce incorrectly. Boston, I know. Worcester, I know how to
Worcester.
say. Thanks. I sort of know how to say it. So probably anywhere you are in and around Mass area, I'd
Yeah.
imagine this wouldn't be too hard to find. Looks like
Yeah.
Eastern New York as well. I think I've seen Night Shifts sporadically, even down here in Carolina before. I think in
Yeah.
Virginia as well.
Yeah, I mean, I know they're opening up a brewery in Philadelphia with the goal of kind of moving more farther west and farther south. So hopefully, I'm not sure where they are on the build and the plans and stuff, but hopefully that happens and we can get stuff like this all the time. I was talking with Robbie about it, and apparently the night light is only available in like 12-pack cans, which is like sweet. Sign me up. That sounds good
I'm
to me.
totally fine with that. Yeah, they have like already, I think 4 or 5 locations. The brewery does in and around Boston and Everett. I think what I love most about this, and we'll probably touch on this in sort of a would you rather later, but this brewery was founded what is now 8 years ago.
Mm,
So I mean that's whatever you're doing for a business, 8 years of success.
yeah.
But it was founded by 3 friends that used to just homebrew beers together in a garage after work. And that, I mean, for me, is somewhat of a romantic. I love the idea that like they got together after work, brewed beer because it was a hobby they enjoyed, and they were able to turn that into a business and make really good beer.
Yeah. Yep, I know they've been awesome from day one, and yeah, done nothing but grow, and now have over 1 million check-ins on Untappd, which is
Wow, I didn't even
cool.
realize that. That's awesome.
Yeah, I know, right? So killing it, and I mean, just continue to grow even more. So kudos to them. Easy to understand why when you drink their beers. Lucky to have a couple of their IPAs, which is what they kind of started out being known for, but pumped that they're in Lagerland now and doing awesome stuff with it.
Yeah, they did. I think my first experience with them, if I actually, I'm gonna look at Untapped. It was September 2016. Holy
Mm,
cow!
ooh,
It what looks like it was at a bottle share, but they were doing a single hop series at the time. They called it One Hop this time, and I had an
yes,
Equinox beer, and I think a
yes.
Galaxy beer as well. I don't see the check in, but that was, I think that was one of the first times I remember seeing like single hop beers just so easy is in the name, and thinking like, man, I wish I could buy like a mixed 12 pack of these and go and like pick apart Simcoe, Galaxy, and Mosaic,
Yep,
all with the same grain build and
yeah, yep.
taste those hops.
I know this single hop beers are great. I had that one too in October 7th, 2016. I had the one hop this time, Equinox. Equinox, such a massive hop, but
Beer buddies.
I just wrote dank. That's it. That was my description in the check. It was dank 5 bottle caps. So
Um,
liked it, dug it.
looking at mine, I hope we're correct. Looking at mine, it seems the label was scratched off because as I read the review, it says this is based on timeline and flavor alone. I assume this is the Equinox version, but either way, it was a good beer. So if I remember correctly, this is 4 years ago. They probably had
Yeah.
a date on the can,
Yep.
and the single hop wasn't published. So let's hope that was right.
Might have been.
One thing I wanted to ask Harrison, we'll cover water in more detail. It's coming up in Beer 101 towards the second part of the show, but
Yeah.
A question that kind of relates here. We've talked about night heavy and their night light version. We're going to talk about water's role in beer, but a timely question is, if you're brewing the heavy version of this beer and the light version of this beer, is there a consideration in water as you're building those recipes and changing things, or could you get away with this? And this is an uninformed question. I'm just asking it because we're talking about the heavy and the light version.
Sure, you'll probably want it to be almost the same or identical. You're gonna, so we'll talk about later, like the water, the pH is the most important thing when it comes to brewing water, and I'll dive more. I'll qualify that in a little bit. But not of just the water of your mash itself. So after you add the grains to that water and you're mashing in, what is that pH? Because the grains will change the pH of that water. So the lighter beer having less grains and lighter grains will change the pH less than the heavy version of it. So you may have to do some slight adjustments to get to your sweet spot of where you want your pH to be of your mash water, but probably not that much, knowing how close the light and the heavy are to each other. But it would be something you'd want to monitor and measure, like the first time they brewed it. I'm sure they did, to see what's our mash pH looking like for the lighter version or the heavier version of this beer, to make sure it's in that same spot. But the grains will be affecting that. So probably not much to change, but it's easy to, at this point, especially when you start with one beer that's close to another in style, to know kind of a ballpark what you got to slightly change to get in your sweet spot.
Speaking of, actually, Sweet Spot would be a cool beer name.
Sure, it exists.
Or even Bottle Shop. You're right. They probably both exist.
Cake Shop.
Hop Spot. Cake,
Cake Shop. That'd be good. Sweet Spot from the Cake Shop.
Actually, yeah. I know both of us have a sweet tooth, so let's. No, seriously, you're listening to Caking Socially.
That's right. Grab your pie and check it in.
Oh man, don't even get me or everyone started. I think we've talked about like an Untappd for wine and whiskey and bagels and soup.
Right, soup one.
The soup one, there's merit
to
that.
Broth hunter. That's right. Get out there and find it. Right. Do you carry gazpacho? Is there a get out of here? Don't check in your gazpacho to broth hunter.
This is a cold steeped bone broth with Madagascar. Anyways, for social media updates, here's where I'll transition. Talking about social media while we finish these beers. I've got two would you rathers that are user submissions.
Nice.
We talked about Greg on the last episode. Greg submitted one that got a lot of attention in the Facebook group, and then more recently, Jared, who had the same red beer as I did, submitted one as well. So. We'll get to Greg, and if we have time before the ad break, I want to just kind of try and entertain Jared's as well. It was a more difficult question, but Greg's is one I think we can all relate to, if anything, wax nostalgic on.
Indeed.
So his question broken down is, would you rather enjoy 6 good beers at a beer festival or wait in queue for 20 or 30 minutes for one amazing beers? I said one amazing beer.
Okay.
So, yeah, I'm going to leave that with you, Harris. We're at a beer festival, and to put it maybe in terms that's easier for everyone to relate with, go to a beer festival. There's not a lot of lines, so you can easily walk down and see 6 breweries that are just pouring and ready to go.
Yep.
But over on this side is like Marshmallow Hanji Dark Lord 2016, but there's a line that's going to take you forever to get it.
Yeah, man, so many thoughts.
Right?
The prankster inside me is coming out thinking, where's the closest fire alarm? Can I pull that? And then problem solved until the police arrive. At that point, who cares? That was my first thought. My second thought was the best life hack you can do at a beer festival is sneak in a bottle of, Abyss Barrel Aged 2014 and just walk past the line next to whatever, brewery you want to go to, open it up and go, hey, want to try some of this? What do you got on tap there? And then all of a sudden a bottle share is happening, no lines matter, and you're on the other side of all the tables kind of working the inner track of all the tents that are set up. So all it takes is a bottle of something crazy and courage, and you can accomplish almost anything. I think a president said that once, but not sure which one. But to answer
George Washington,
right? That's him. Sure. That's his name, right? Couldn't remember his first name. It's this is a tough, right? It's a tough predicament because you know, right? Like, why are you at that festival? Is it to try something you can never have anywhere else? Then it's probably going to be that beer that has the long line, and if that's why you're there, then you've kind of committed to that. And great, stand there and talk with other beer fans and all that stuff, and commit to that experience. Get up there and check it out. For me personally, though, beer. Anytime anyone says beer festival, I have kind of flashbacks of the millions I've worked, where it's just like such a different experience and kind of just waiting for
When
the
you're working it,
right.
where's
Sure.
one sandwich?
Exactly. If you give me 5 minutes, or like at the right at the 2 hour mark, just everyone becomes a zombie, and it's your kind of job to kind of fend them off and redirect them to water stations and talk them down off of whatever crazy idea ledge they're on. Had a lot of wild conversations the latter half of many a beer festival. But right, to try to push that all aside, I'm fine with sitting in a line for a while and grabbing a beer, because that's probably why I'm there if I'm at a festival. However, right, like I mean, it's almost like you want to stay away from those lines, like game it right, where like, cool, go have your beer. I'm gonna get all the other beers no one's drinking now, and then go jump in that line afterwards, which is cheating the question. But that would be like in a real world scenario. That's what my brain would do if I didn't get there before when the line was small and I got there too late. I'm just walking away, maybe hovering nearby, grabbing a couple of beers from other things, see when that line maybe dies for a minute, jump in it then. Um, at any given festival, I always have my list of like, all right, here are the 5 breweries I need to get to. And like, again, I've kind of mentally committed to like, if there's a line, I'm in that line. Luckily though, beer festival has been going on long enough where even those beer lines can move pretty quickly. The ones that are stacked 100 people deep. So yeah, I don't know. It's a tough thing to actually parse apart. But my gut, if I walked into a festival and saw long lines, would be, let's go get 6 cool beers that also I may not know about. And that's the other part about that, is that sure, you may go to a festival with an agenda of I want this cool, crazy barrel aged thing, and in the process discover your next favorite brewery that you had while waiting for that beer you thought you were there for, and then you discover the place that you always overlooked at the bottle shop for whatever reason, because their labels weren't crazy, or you didn't know enough about them, or whatever it is. And they're there and no line. Let's check it out. I've done that plenty of times. I used to happen almost every fest I went to, and that kind of became a thing too, where it was like, let's find these 5 beers, but then what's going to be my kind of like surprise of the festival, a brewery I never had before that's going to wow me. Where can I find that? So I'm going for the 6 beers, hoping I discover the next Dark Lord along the way.
I don't think you're incorrect. I think from a logic standpoint, which is generally how I try and make all my decisions, that's the best road to go down. There's been many times I went to a beer festival and discovered something, unintentional. Whether it be, I'll admit, a kombucha is weird to me, but I remember there was a festival where it was just like a tiny, like it was a dude that was making kombucha in his garage and somehow showed up at this beer festival, and it was amazing. I was like, this is not real. This tastes like ginger
kombucha, right?
So I love those surprises, but having been to enough festivals, I know damn well when I see a big line, I'll get in there without even knowing what's at the other end of it, and just hope it's going to be great.
Right.
You pointed out a really valuable lesson. If you don't do this already, if it's possible, see who's going to be there. A lot of times a festival will tell you the breweries that are going to be there, so you can know ahead of time, I have to find these 5 or 10 or however much. And then if they're really nice, they'll give you a map, and you'll be able to really get granular and plan it out like a dad on a European vacation.
Exactly.
So plan. That would be my first advice. Plan. If you have the option, get a VIP ticket so you can get there early before that line's huge, and then you'll be the one going up and down all the other breweries that are easier to get to while everyone waits in line. If you don't have a VIP option, get married and have your significant other wait in that long line. Grab a beer, find your significant other, have them taste it while they're in line, and then bring them back another beer. So this way, it's almost like cloning yourself. That's
right. That's genius too. Yes, John. Exactly.
Except my problem is, my God bless her, because I love her so much. But my wife will usually volunteer to do that and then just leave the line halfway through, and I won't be able to find her for the rest of the festival. I won't know if I'm getting that beer.
Where's my wife? I'm hungry.
What,
Right.
what have I done? I'll just wait in the line. We'll meet her.
We'll find her in another line.
And
Right.
she's sharing a bottle of Abyss with the brewers up there.
Exactly. Right. You're right. You're right. Trying to find a bathroom, but it's just endless broom closets. That's the wrong door again. Where is the bathroom? Why don't they mark them?
Man, that makes me miss going to beer festivals. Though I've had every one of them, good, great, bad. Every one of them I've had a good time at. I've met some amazing people. A lot of my Untappd friends now come from doing this podcast or our own virtual festival. But before, I would just meet people at beer festivals and we would add each other on Untappd, and I still keep in touch with a lot of them. It was really fun.
Yeah.
Next question before we go to break. This one comes from Jared. He put it in the Facebook group. I think it was pretty recent. And this one, none of the would you rathers have a right or wrong answer, but for this, it's probably an answer more of, I think his words were, it'll require some finesse, but maybe I'll ask you, Harrison.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna paraphrase and put into my own words what his question reads. But
yes.
So if you're opening your own brewery, Harrison's Brewery, or maybe you're more creative than that.
Brew pub.
Harrison's Brew Pub and Chicken and Pies. Would you? I have to. Okay, so would you rather maintain the business of a brewery that you enjoy without a lot of hype as is, or would you rather be more exposed with social media or even like using Untappd and doing some marketing? And I can't read from his question. I don't know if he's asking like, would you as a visitor prefer this or would you as a brewer prefer this? So I'm going to ask you, as a brewer opening up your own brewery, would you rather kind of go the low and slow word of mouth, no marketing route and just do it for the love of the sport? Or would you rather use social media and marketing and things to get your name out there?
Right. Yeah, it's a great question because especially asking like of the brewer, what do you want? And you'd probably like as a brewer, if that's your job and your job is to be the brewer, you probably care about one thing, and that's making great beer. And if it was me, my perfect situation is I hoodwink some venture capitalists into giving me a bunch of money, and I just make a bunch of beer that happens to be in a commercial brewery, and and it gets sold to people. But being realistic about it, that venture capitalist probably wants a return on his investment. He wouldn't be a good venture capitalist if he didn't. So any business requires, money to keep the lights on. So it'd be really important, as much as I'd rather focus on, making beer and diving into that stuff, to have an audience for that beer to get to. Because that would be, the worst thing ever to spend all this time making a bunch of beer and then no one knows about it. And it's kind of just, it's just a bunch of work that doesn't really matter. That was one of the really cool things about just working in breweries is, at the end of the day, when you were exhausted and the tap room would open up, hundreds of people would come in there and drink a bunch of beer that you made. It was a wild thing to sit back there and watch all these people laughing and sharing stories and having a good time. Really, being powered or fueled or whatever however you want to look at it, by this beer you spent, time making. And I wasn't expecting that when I first started, to have that kind of experience and stuff. So obviously customers are important to any business. So I would jump in, and knowing all that now, kind of going through that journey that we just did, this exercise, knowing that though, you can't be quiet about this stuff. If for no other reason that Untappd won't let you, like the Untappd fans are going to find you, the users are going to find you checking your beers, and then people are going to be on Untappd talking about it. And, it's better to be in front of that snowball and, guiding where it goes instead of standing at the bottom of the hill, just getting wrecked with it unexpectedly. So in this day and age, social media, obviously it's ubiquitous, it's everywhere. And you want to be controlling that conversation and using it to as a platform to get people excited about what you're making and build that community in your tap room, so you can sit there at the end of a hard day and go, oh, that guy's laughing, and I heard him over say this is one of the better stouts he's ever had. That's really cool. That might not happen if I kept quiet in my dark cellar, just making beer and counting yeast cells and stuff, which is exciting. But when you are in the industry long enough, you realize it's only part. The beer making is really only part of that whole entire experience. It's not the whole shebang.
I think you said that. I think you answered that perfectly from what I view. I've never been responsible to be I've never been a professional brewer responsible for making beer for masses and commerce. I do have a long history of doing that in a professional kitchen, and I think there's a similarity.
Yes.
Like
Oh
there's
yeah.
passion. You're turning ingredients into a product that can be nostalgic or memory creating for people that purchase it, and you can't do that without a passion or a love for that. You can't just come in and mix sauce with noodle and export pasta. I mean, you can. There's
Right.
franchises that have made a big deal of
Sure.
it,
Right.
and we see that in the beer world as well. But even any talented, motivated chef that I was lucky enough to work for and learn from, even though they had an immense talent and love for creating these Epicurean experiences, they knew that unless they wanted to just do this at home for dinner parties and friends, you had to tell people, you had to sell tickets or covers,
Sure.
reservations,
Sure.
and you
Yeah.
had to give people a good experience so that they would come back and talk about you to their friends. But
Yep.
I guess I think you can have them both together. Yes, everybody loves. I love when I go to a brewery. We did on last season. Corey brought us a beer from Fermentary Form in
Yeah.
Philadelphia, and
Philly. Yeah.
it's like a super. I don't know if I can still say the word, but like hipster joint where like
Oh yeah.
you go into an alley and there's an unmarked door. Like I love discovering stuff like that. And
Yes.
if you do it well, people will tell and you'll sell all your products. And at the end of the day,
Right.
that's what really matters. You can be amazing at your craft, but if you're not profitable, then what's the point of doing it for business? You should just share it with your friends. Like
Right.
I think there has to be some marketing and some hype um, to make it worth your while.
Sure.
And that's again, I'll view this very logically and business driven, but use marketing. As Harrison said, social media is ubiquitous, and you can control it to a factor, or you can ignore it and curse it, but you're not going to get rid of it. And I think controlling it is a great way to send your message, promote your brand, tell people what you're doing, and let them embrace that if they love it.
Oh yeah. Yep. Yeah. Especially when you get in and open a brewery and you're making cool beer, and then if you want to buy more cool ingredients, you need people coming in drinking your beer to do that. So once you step into that puddle, you want to like it kind of becomes a river and then a lake very quickly. Where you're like, oh wow, I wish we need more people in the door because I got plans. I can see where this could go, and it needs support from my local beer fans to get there together. I mean, we've said it again and again that beer breweries have historically been and now are again the community hub for many reasons. Many, not just because it's a place to drink, but a place to gather and have ideas and cool conversations and literal like town hall meetings, like stuff like that. So if you want to be that focus point, you have to kind of keep providing quality products and innovating if you want to keep coming back, and can't do that without the customer. So yeah, I mean, I'm all again. It's a lovely romantic idea to think you can sit quietly on a mountaintop with your humble little brewery and make stuff, but after you make it and no one buys it, you can't make any more of it. And then the dream ends, and you're just stuck on a mountain.
True. This isn't business 101, but you have to find a way to maintain a balance sheet. And there's no slighter. This isn't meant to be diminutive, but brew in your garage and share it with your friends. If you really just do it as a hobby and for the love of the sport, because as Harrison will tell you many times, some of the best beers anyone's ever had were made in a garage.
Oh yeah, garage or a barn or somewhere deep in the woods. That was dark and mysterious. Lots of ELO music playing in the background somewhere. But yeah, a lot of made plenty of magic happen in barns. But even those guys knew it was just just for the fun of it. Oh
Yeah.
man,
I
great
want that
memories.
to be the tagline of the show. We'll see if we can share that. I had many magic made in
Magic in a
barns.
barn. Yeah, I saw that coming. Just went for it.
I appreciate you going for it, man.
All the memories, all the memories. That's another tale for another time. I may have already told it actually, so maybe it already is recorded somewhere. But cool. We're gonna now take a quick break, listen to our favorite ad man, give you some info about stuff, and then we'll drink another beer when we get back.
Want to show off your love of Untappd? Check out our online store and pick up Untappd branded glassware, shirts, sweatshirts, hats, more. Depending on how hot or cold you are, go to store.untappd.com and enter the coupon code podcast when you check out. That'll get 20% off anything you order. That's store.untappd.com. Use the coupon code podcast, 20% off for you. Plus, it lets them know that you guys are listening, and we love that here.
All right, fantastic. And now it is time for beer number 2. We have House Lager from Jack's Abbey Craft Lagers out of Framingham, Mass. Is the beer numero dos tonight.
Hold it up to the
to the peeps out there. Style wise, classified as a Helles style lager. On the can, it says a golden lager or a Helles land beer on the back of it, which is pretty cool. 5.3% ABV, so a little bit more than Night Heavy. 18 IBUs, and the notes from Jack's Abbey. What the Helles is the land beer? Hilarious. Oh, love me a good pun, as we all know. Ours is sweet and golden with a full malty body inspired by the country lagers of Bavaria. This pale beer is our house specialty, from Jack's house to your house. And yeah, don't need to say much more than that. This is one of my all-time favorite lagers, all-time favorite beers. I remember the first time I had it. It also doesn't hurt that originally being from Connecticut, you can find a 6-pack of 16-ounce cans for like $8 or $9 at a good at a good bottle shop, so or liquor store if you're in Connecticut, because bottle shops don't really exist there. But yeah, so it's one that I discovered and then was pleasantly surprised that it was very affordable and delicious. And it's just, I'm pampered. I've wanted to do it for a while, ever since I had it and knew I was also doing a podcast, ever since we did their Oktoberfest last season.
That Jack's Abbey's Oktoberfest. That was, I know we didn't really announce a winner on that show, but that was a magical. That was probably the winner for me.
That was one we talked about a lot afterwards, of kind of when we walked away and had some time to actually process all the beers we had. We kind of both came back to that one again and again. It's like, holy cow, Copper Legend is that beer. And we did a lot of Oktoberfest that episode. Jump back into season 2 and check it out if you haven't. But yeah, I mean, this is, again, great beer. We wanted to highlight lagers today, talking about water, not for any real particular reason other than for all the reasons I like lagers. You can't hide anything in these beers, whether it's any off flavor from anywhere. You can't have it. And these beers had to be executed perfectly, which this one always is. So let's jump into this thing and enjoy it together, John.
I'm excited, and thank you for I probably should have brought that up. We're drinking 2 lagers on the episode where we Beer 101 water, and that wasn't meant to be a slight.
Nope.
But I love your point of like, there's nothing you can hide behind here. This is a 3-ingredient dish, well 4, but sometimes a little bit more. Okay, sorry about the culinary example, but there's nothing to hide behind here. It's a little bit cloudier than
it is, and that could just
with night shift.
Right, could be a bit of a chill haze, but yeah, you're right. Little bit of cloudiness there. Big old puffy white head that is hanging around. Man, it's just like sweet cereal, corn, honeydew dancing and amber waves of grain. Love this.
Very patriotic of you. These guys also, they unpasteurize their beer isn't pasteurized. We saw that with Red Oak recently with their Maibach.
True. Yep. So this is unfiltered and unpasteurized. So probably where the haze is coming from, it sat in lagering tanks as long as it needed to. But you don't, if you're not filtering this through something, it can look like a slight haze to it, although not like, excuse me, out of context or out of character for the style at all. I mean, this thing looks great.
Yeah, exactly. It's definitely not hazy, but it's not clear like the last one was. And it's easier to point that out because I just drank the last one and we kind of talked about it.
Right.
Drinking this, good Lord, Jack's Abbey is that brewery began as lagering, right? That's kind of their only focus.
Yeah, that's all. Yeah, that's all they do. They have an offshoot called, oh man, it's called, I should know this. It's called Spring something, I think. Hold on, it does ale, like ales and so not lagers. But yes, Jack's Abbey craft lagers is just lagers, and they made a bunch of waves early on because they didn't. I mean, I don't know what their first beer they ever brewed was, but what they got attention with was from Hoponius Union and Kiwi Rising and Excess, which are like IPLs, India Pale Lagers, which was a big deal a couple years ago, where someone decided, hey, let's hop the heck out of some lagers and kind of make them like a smoother IPA, and that's how it was born. And for a lot of places, grew and died pretty quickly, but Hoponius Union from Jack's Abbey is still their number one Checked beer, and it's awesome. They do it perfectly. They really very quickly like took a new kind of style and mastered it, which is pretty wild. And now we also have these great beers. Number two, Checked Beer House Lager, which we're drinking now, is more traditional, and they're making both. They're doing awesome Oktoberfest, like we spoke about. Still a bunch of IPLs out here. They do a shandy, a blood orange wheat, which is one like a lot of people talk about on Untappd, and it's also one of their top checked in beers. So a lot of really great stuff they're producing. But this time of year, it's house
There's
lager for me all the way.
the shandy, the lager focus. There's a Germanic kind of feel to this
Oh yeah,
brewery. Is it correct for me to say that like this is influenced by Germany? Are we to a point where we can say this is like an American lager producing brewery, or do you? And this is a subjective question, but do you feel like a place like Jack's Abbey or Red Oak, like, do they open up seeking to replicate what's happening in Germany, or are they just kick-ass lager makers that happen to live here in the states?
yeah. Well, so I would, while Red Oak and Jack's Abbey do only make lagers, I would kind of put them on two different sides of the spectrum there, where Red Oak does just want to make traditional German style inspired beers, and then Jack's Abbey does that and is not hiding at all behind the fact that they're influenced by lagers from all across Europe, but then also for sure have this American approach to it of hopping the heck out of some of them, which is pretty cool. But on their website, they state our mission is to create truly distinctive lagers featuring locally grown ingredients, traditional German brewing standards, and American innovation. So they're kind of marrying the old world and the new there, but definitely calling back to Bavaria and the 200-year-old tradition of these lagers and all that stuff. So, and that was Chamonix Creek was very similar in that like our head brewer was trained in Germany, like went to school there, was part of a program that did like a semester there. Rather, it was a U.S. based brewing school, but was brewing in Germany for a while. So like we would make Bavarian style beers, German style pilsners. We'd always say that when we made a beer, it would be in the kind of our description on the can would be a German style pilsner, a Czech style pilsner, a Bavarian style lager. Really owning that it was influenced by Germany and not like an American version of it. We wanted to make those beers as close as possible to what they always tasted like, but then also tons of IPAs where we had different kinds of fun with. So I think they're doing something similar to that, and that like they definitely have some big beers like their Framing Hammer Baltic Porter. They barrel age all kinds of stuff, which is really cool. And then lagers,
That is
IPA stuff.
that is something I guess I wouldn't have expected Red Oak or some
Right.
like a more German traditional style to go for barrel aging a lager. That
Sure.
that sounds
Sure.
adventurous.
Sure.
Um, Tim, so another question I had, even though we're featuring basically two breweries from the Boston area,
Right.
I noticed on Untappd recently, I think like very recently, like July 4th weekend, Jack's Abbey was part of, I don't think it was a tap takeover, but they got featured on a beer menu in Seoul, South Korea at Seoul Beer Project. And
Whoa.
they have like 7 or 8 of their beers
Oh yeah.
in South Korea, which is really cool. So I don't assume that's going to be a regular thing, but I think that's awesome.
They
Kind
do.
of helping grow. Asia's beer scene is, I mean, that's a whole different. We could do a whole season on that.
Oh yeah, how fast it's growing and stuff.
Holy cow!
Oh yeah, for sure. Right, how fast it's growing and all that. Yeah, you're right. They have a ton. I wonder if they got some bourbon barrel aged Framing Hammer right there in 500 ml bottles. And the Springdale, that's their other sister brewery,
Ah,
Springdale. They have a maple barrel aged Brigidario from them, which is a double imperial stout maple barrel. So I mean, these guys are killing it, whether it's lagers or not. Um, But yeah, you're right. I'm seeing that too. I'm looking at that Soul Beer Project event that looks like they did with them this past weekend, which is that's pretty killer. And yeah, you see this all over there about Jack's Abbey itself, more than 862,000 total check-ins, 184,000 unique. So a lot of fans there, a lot of repeat.
They'll probably be hitting their million maybe
Yeah,
or
maybe end of the
by
year.
the end of the year. Yeah.
Maybe they're averaging a couple thousand check-ins a month, and House Lager has 53,000 of those check-ins. So we get number 2 checked-in beer for them,
Man.
um, and yeah. So just doing it's anyway. It's just a great beer. I wanted to get on the podcast. Wanted to share it with you, John, and have you everyone out there listening. If you're able to, get it in their footprint, you should do it if you haven't had it yet. It's easy to walk by a lager on the shelf, but I'm telling you, stop, pick this one up because it does a lot. It just quenches your thirst. It takes you to awesome classic German style beer. It's just a delicious thing to drink. There's just lots of boxes of checks for me.
Totally. As I said earlier, I've been consuming in mass a single dry hop lager,
You're
which
right.
is still, in my opinion, is the greatest beer I've ever had.
Uh,
But it'll change, right? Like that. That's an opinion. In 6 months, it'll be a different beer.
yep.
Maybe in a week, who knows?
Who knows?
Um, but definitely drinking these two beers. And a couple of months ago, we grabbed a 6 pack of Sam Adams Boston Lager and
Yep.
drinking that. Like it's just maybe it's my age catching up with me or my after work activities, but sometimes it's really nice to have a beer that doesn't consume not only my palate but like the next 20 minutes or sometimes maybe
Right.
it's kind of
Yeah,
like
longer.
setting
Right.
down a little too relaxing.
Right.
uh, Being
Right.
able to crack open a lager like while you're finishing that last minute project, especially with a lot of us working from home, it's nice to just crack one of these open subtly in your last Zoom meeting of the day, or like on Sunday, there is no football, there's not a lot of sports going on, but
Right.
on Sunday at noon, I mean, hell yeah, crack open a double New England IPA if you've got it in you, but pick up a 4 pack of lagers and start there because you can
Right.
drink and you can continue making your chicken wings and preparing your dinner, and then open the New England, once
Yeah.
most of your chores are done. Now I
Right.
sound
Yeah.
like my dad, damn it.
Only a matter of time. But that's right. Yeah, you're right. It's a reason this style of beer is what most is the most popular lager I'm talking about overall. Just like the most popular style of beer in the states, probably all over the world. Really, if you look at it, yeah, that beer, right? It's drinkable. It's not much of a mental commitment, which you kind of bring up a good point, John. I think about a lot where being in this industry as long as we've been in it and making as many beers as I have, it's almost impossible, much like an actor or whatever watching a movie, to lose himself in that movie because they're like, I can see the chord right there, that special effects, that car didn't blow up, and it's like, oh man, you can't just enjoy the chase. It's become like your brain is can't help itself but to figure it out. That's the same with like a lot of IPAs or complex imperial stouts or whatever, where I drink it and I'm like, what is that hop? I know this. Let me sip again. And I'm like doing an exercise. It's almost like I'm back at work when every Wednesday we do triangle tests to kind of challenge ourselves to learn that, and that your brain kind of defaults to it. Where a lager, obviously, again, we've said again and again, this is no slight against them. It's a very approachable beer, and that's a good thing. Where you got to turn your brain off, have a couple, have it taste great, not to sit there and do some weird kind of mental hula hooping where you're like, what is that? What yeast is that? Is that why is it hazy? Is it the malt or something else? What am I tasting here? This is just boom, going to taste the same each time you drink it, and it doesn't require much mental capacity to drink this thing. At least for me, it's just kind of like, wow, that's great, and that's it. I kind of float away.
Delicious. On to the next. So speaking of how delicious this beer is, I want to get to what we've been excited about for the last week or so, getting ready for the episode where we try and make water exciting. But before, in drinking this beer, Harrison, I
Yeah.
want to ask, what's your view on the flavor? We talked about aroma when we first opened it briefly, and even still, like for me, I can get toasted biscuit in the aroma on
Yep.
this, which isn't something I think you think of when you think of a lager. You think maybe when I think of a lager, I think of the last commercial I saw, which is the Bud Light night fixing a castle or something like that.
Right.
And the aroma on that is generally water.
Right.
or closer to it anyways.
Right.
There's an
Sure.
analogy there about something in a canoe, but
Yep.
um, it's a flavor in this beer, and it's important to talk about flavor in a lager. I mean, basil is beautiful on itself and has an amazing flavor, and it just because it's just a leaf doesn't mean you should ignore it. So,
Right.
what's the
Oh,
what do you get in terms of flavor on this very masterfully crafted lager from Jack's Abbey?
sure. Yeah, of course. I mean, it's much so. Yeah, the nose, even like what I get predominantly is like a subtle kind of honeyness, I guess you would say, to it, where it's not honey sweet. It's almost as if you took the sweetness away from the honey, and put it basically like a honey sandwich almost, where it's like nice, good loaf of freshly baked bread, throw some honey on it, take a bite, and that's what's happening kind of in my mouth right now. So it's again not complex. It's just very well made, but it's kind of like a you can get other things like I almost a moment ago I was drinking it and I was like, gosh, is that cantaloupe? Again, without the sweetness, I try to imagine that which is tough to do because fruit's mostly sugar. So like taking the sweet away is like, what am I? What do you want to eat the rind? It's
Drinking a
like
beer, walking
right,
past the cantaloupe
right,
farm.
exactly. There you go. Right, that's right, right, exactly. If you can imagine a cantaloupe is 2 rooms away and he's yelling about something, that's what this is. Um, yeah, so there's like a little bit of cantaloupe, a little bit of cereal, but it's not as pronounced. There was definitely drinking it alongside Night Heavy. There was more bread notes in that one than this one. This one is like more honey, and there's like this subtle undertone of like toasted, like someone toasted some bread in the next room, and you're smelling it. It's definitely that. It's definitely you just can't miss it.
Nope, I think that's perfect. The flavor, if I had to rate how much, what's the volume of flavor in this beer? I don't know, but it's less than the night shift beer. Like there's less volume crammed in this beer, like per square inch, if that makes sense to anyone.
Sure, sure.
Um, but what is there in flavor is like it's non-offensive. It's just a note. Like you said, cantaloupe. I get a little bit of apple. It's hard to nail down because it's not necessarily. I'm I'm picking it up when I drink the beer, but it's almost like I'm smelling an apple while I'm drinking this beer.
Right, right. Yeah, and that's something that's unique to, or as I've found it, like unique to Hella style lagers. Like there's a brewery in outside of Philadelphia called Sly Fox, and they make
Oh yeah,
high Hellas Lager is their one of their go-to beers. That forever was just a proof of exclusive, and they finally canned it a couple of years ago, and that was one of the best days of my life. That's a whole other story. But there's a similar note that I've always had a hard time kind of like picking out in this beer as in that beer as in other German style Helles lagers too. And it's kind of like right, maybe it's just cereally, maybe it's the body itself that kind of I'm almost tasting. If you will, it is because it is subtly sweet. But again, it's like it's not cloying. It just lives in this weird place where it's just so subtle. It's almost like your your brain is trying to like find more there and almost imagining more flavors, trying to make it make sense, trying to have you associate this with the closest thing you've had to it, in the past, and that can create maybe some I don't know some kind of ghost flavors and stuff. But it's really yeah, it's very bread, kind of lightly toasted stuff happening. But I've had it in almost every Helles lager I've ever enjoyed, and it's also not for nothing like the German noble hops that are like more floral and can sometimes be piney, but not like dank piney. It's probably adding a little bit to that undertone. We're tasting cantaloupe and apple and stuff. It's that fruitiness that can come through in those hops, how dry they are, how low in alpha acids they are. It really is the flavor you get, and not that bitterness that you go, that's the hop I'm tasting. It's like almost like you only have half. You think you only have half the puzzle because you're just tasting the hop and not the flavor of it, and not experiencing the bitterness. So your brain's trying to like make sense of that. So that's
and
probably coming in too.
when you say hops in a lager like this, we'd expect like Tettnang or Hallertau or something like not a fancy name new hop, but a traditional Bavarian German style.
Hmm. Oh yeah,
Um,
for sure.
and you mentioned like Hellas. Jack's Abbey calls this a land beer, which, to the best of my knowledge, is kind of, I would say that's marketing. Land beer isn't fully isn't like as defined as so many other beer styles, but to the best of what I could learn, it's kind of roughly translated into like rustic lager or country lager, generally with a little
Right.
bit more of a malt build, which I think,
Right.
as we would have talked about on the last episode with malt, there you get a lot of flavor from this beer. It comes in the malt, less from the hops. And
Sure.
the question I want to ask you before we jump into Beer 101 is like lagering. A lot of times we talk about how quick you can make an IPA or an ale
Mm,
versus a lager. Um, they don't filter this beer, they don't pasteurize this beer, so it's meant to be drank fresh. But how long would it take in no certain terms, but is this something where they'd be able to crank out a whole bunch of this in a week or two, or does this have to kind of sit in lager for a long time?
yeah, that's a lager for a while, and a while is touch and go. We would always, I think I mentioned it before, but we would always like it would be between 27 and probably 32 or 34 days from start to finish for our lagers, so almost twice as long, if not longer, than our IPAs. And we had a bunch of horizontal lagering tanks that we would lager them in for that exact to that exact end, which we can talk more about in the cellaring and the fermentation episodes of a Beer 101, lagering itself. But yeah, these are right. Slow and steady is the way to go for these guys. You really can't rush them. You would try, but it would just be like a weird, probably grassy mess that looked cloudy and was just not the beer you were trying to make. Time is a ingredient here, almost, to have them be this clear,
Awesome. I
uh,
love that.
and look like this. Otherwise, you're serving something else. Um, for sure.
The fifth ingredient in all beers, time.
It's time. You heard it here first. Not THYME, but the time we're all experiencing in 1 second at a time. That time. Some of us slower on some days.
True, man. After a long weekend Monday, yep.
That's right.
So now to get to the part where I get to pick Harrison's brain on all the bits of Doc Brown-esque beer knowledge that he keeps packed away up there in old parchments and scrolls.
Right. Flux capacitors. Yep.
So today's Beer 101, we've covered so far in episode 13. We did malt in episode 14, and here we're going to talk about water. And then in the next episode, we'll finish off the 4 key components with yeast. But today's focus is water, and I'm ready if you are, Harrison.
Let's do it. Let's dive in. And I said dive in. I didn't even mean to do that, but whatever. It's too late. It already happened.
The man's a pun machine. He can't help himself. Okay, starting off with question number 1. So we've covered hops and malt. I just illustrated this, but I wrote this question down a week ago. So here's my question. Much like making a good soup, water plays a role, but usually isn't the highlight. Nobody thinks of the water when they get a beautiful tomato soup. So can you just kind of explain to us, surface level, why water and water quality plays such a role in making good beer?
Sure. So there's a common phrase in music that jazz is the notes you don't play.
Damn, it's already beautiful.
Right. And for anyone who's heard a wild Miles Davis trumpet solo, maybe a light's gone on your head now of like, oh, he's playing literally every note but these two. Perhaps that's the song he's trying to have me hear, is the stuff he's not laying out there. So anyway, I love that quote and that idea. And I think the same can be said for water and beer. It's not so much what is in the water that matters, but what's not in that water when you use it to make your beer itself. And there are so many things that can be, whether it's too many minerals from the groundwater or detergents or chlorine if you're in a city that's treating the water that way. There are lots of things that are in the water we drink every day that can mess with the quality of your beer, and ultimately the pH of that water is what matters the most, which is in turn affected by all sorts of things. Water chemistry is complex. That's why there are books and classes about it, and people are experts about it. But we'll cover it, right, high level today. But pH is going to be the most important part of it. Assuming you're not like scooping water out of a pond and you're getting it from like your tap or something like that. Let's start there. Try to get the best water you can, and then kind of work from what you have. And chlorine is always like for living in Philadelphia and working Luckily, Neshaminy Creek was right outside the city's limits, so we did not have to use city water. We used water from Neshaminy Creek. That's why it's called that. So we were using water from rivers and reservoirs and estuaries and stuff, which is a little bit different than groundwater. But getting water from your tap, it's probably fine. Like the old relax, don't worry, have a home brew is always top of mind for me when talking about stuff like this. Like, don't be that guy who doesn't start brewing because you're terrified your water is going to destroy it. Nope, you don't want to. Don't go down that rabbit hole. You're probably good. However, there's some good things to consider, and really the goal is kind of getting your pH pretty neutral to start, around 7, which most tap water is. And then knowing that what matters more than the water is the mash water. So you're going to be obviously adding a bunch of grain to this. That's going to change what that water's pH is. Grain is acidic. And that's what matters the most. You're not just making, you're obviously the process is putting the grain in that water to make the wort, and that pH is what matters the most. So as long as you start somewhere around 7, perfect. But really, it's about what's not in there. Most tap water, though, like almost all of it, should be great. Just you have chlorine, you can boil it off ahead of time, or pour it out the night before in like your brew kettle, let it gas off itself, or use Camden tablets, which is potassium metabisulfite, which will also help off gas that chlorine. That's the biggest one that you hear like most often. If you're like getting other weird stuff in your water, you can always go on your town's like local website and like find out what their water tests are and dive in there and learn like what the pH of the water is, how hard is it, where does it come from. That's cool, but you're probably going to find that it's around 7, and your mash will change it. Drop it even further. Now, brewers will do this through mashing, but also using brewing salts. So those things like gypsum, which is calcium sulfate, or calcium chloride to balance the pH, and even use lactic acid, like literally dump it in there into the beer. If you test your pH mash and it's too high or too low, you can change that by treating the water, which most breweries do. Most commercial breweries are doing something with their water. Even if it's fine when it comes out, they're probably touching it up a bit.
So a quick kind of distillation. Damn it. I don't know if it's a water pun, but pH is a key, and pH effectively is a scale of like how base or acidic a liquid or solution is.
Mm-hmm.
So 7 sits right around the middle, which is like perfect water. It's not acidic or base.
Oh, right.
And effectively, you can check on in many resources what the water coming out of your tap is. It's probably going to be really close to 7.
Mm-hmm.
So you shouldn't really have to worry about that too much.
Right.
Where you can lose touches is when you start mashing in. That'll affect your pH. And there's so that's in most recipes, you can probably safely assume that the recipe was built to service a water around 7 in pH. So you don't really have to worry about affecting it a lot. But sometimes, right, there's certain malts that'll raise or lower a pH more.
Yeah. It'll drop it down. Yeah, and that's good. You want it to be between like 5.2 and 5.6 on the pH scale. Your mash water, and darker grains are more acidic. They'll drop it down more. So like stouts, you're going to drop lower compared to a pale ale, or the lagers drinking tonight. They probably had to treat that water to get it to a place where that wasn't creating off flavors in that beer, like really sulfury kind of gaseous flavors that you can get from lagers sometimes can come from the water just being too high or too low on the pH scale, and using brewing salts to accomplish that in a really pale and light grain bill is like necessary. You need to do something like that.
Okay, so it's definitely, maybe at this point water hasn't become double dry hop Citra, but it is important in giving your double dry hop Citra a place to shine.
Yes,
if you don't pay attention to that.
Yeah, you want to dry it out. Yeah, for sure. Especially with IPAs. I mean, that was probably when we treated the most treatment was with IPAs, putting gypsum in there to kind of drop the pH more. That allowed the dryness of the hops to shine through and really be apparent in that final beer, having something closer to 5.2 as opposed to 5.6 or 7 pH. That's a very small window, but it's incrementally, it makes a big difference when you're brewing a huge batch of beer.
Anybody I think that's ever had a pool knows what
right.
If you've ever lifed summer, you're already halfway to making your own beer at home.
Right, that's right.
So that being said, while so far water hasn't become necessarily a huge star. We can see that it is important. It's the canvas in which you paint on.
Hmm.
So it is important in that regard. But that being said, are there any beers or beer styles that come to mind, Harrison, that kind of show off water quality? And we can skip this
Right.
if you want, but
Well, I mean, really, it's again, it's about like the showing off is the right. It's the absence of anything bad. Like you don't want to show off. It's more about when water is there and invisible, and that canvas, you can realize the painting's on. That it's doing its best job, and you can nowadays mouthfeel has become a big talking point with all these hazy IPAs out there, and how do you accomplish that? You can use lactose to change the mouthfeel, oats, wheat, other adjuncts to get that like velvety smooth experience. A good example, though, of a brewery that is really focusing on treating their water is Treehouse. So they're famous for hazy IPAs, but they claim that they don't use adjunct grains to get there. It's all about their water and treating it appropriately with the right kind of brewing salts, based on the water they start with, of course, to get that hazy appearance. Obviously, they're also using like English ale yeasts and hops like Citra that kick off a lot of haze and create a hazy beer. But they're just pretty much just relying on the water and then the yeast and the hops to make it look like someone dumped a mountain of wheat in it when they in fact have not, which is really interesting. And again, like kind of sneaking a look at your next question, it speaks to kind of this battle that's I think almost fruitless of people hunting down water of like, okay, I got to duplicate Treehouse's water in my house. How do I do that? And I think that's almost always a dead end because they're going to be doing things to that water. If you go and get like the water report for the town Treehouse is in, try to duplicate that water, you're missing out on what Treehouse is doing to it. It's not. It's just part of this equation.
that makes good. So the next question I have queued up for Harrison is in air quotes the New York bagel or pizza
Yes.
question.
Yep.
So many people are probably familiar with the fact that like the reason New York bagels are so good is because of the water. One of the first professional brewing experiences I had was with a brewer who was previously a water chemist, and we were going to make an
Right.
ESB, and I thought, all right, let's ESB recipes and figure out. And he began with ESBs are from London. We're going to make the water that comes out of the faucet in London. So I mean, and you touched on that with Treehouse as well, Harrison. Like, would I be vain in thinking that when a professional brewery like we did Green Man last episode, when they're making an ESB, do they try and replicate the water in London or Belgium to make a Belgium tasting beer? Is that something that comes up very often?
Yeah, and yeah, and again, it's yes, you want to like, but it's part of this bigger bigger conversation, or it's again just step one of like two other steps you need to know, otherwise you're going to miss the mark. For example, the Burton on Trent, which is a town north of London, which is where the IPA was born, and kind of a lot of historians have called it like the most important brewing city in the world, and it's used to have 30 breweries in it 200 years ago, and all this really cool stories about it. Had really hard water, and so I've looked at like brewing websites and used apps to build my recipes that have like the Burton on Trent water profile in there. What is that? How do I recreate that? But what's not in those equations is that those brewers were pre-boiling that water to because it's really hard to try to cancel some of that out before they even mashed in with it. So they did the night before just to kind of get a lot of the solids out of that water and make it actually drinkable. So if you try to recreate the water that comes out of the tap in Burton on Trent, it's not going to be the same water those breweries were using or are still using today because they're doing something to the water that comes out of that faucet. And so same with like Germany, like the Pilsen region where Pilsners were born. That water, they've been treating it, the brewers have for like hundreds of years with brewing salts because it's so soft, trying to add some hardness to it. So it's really important. Hardness is not everything. pH is not everything. It's part of this equation that's like easy to measure. But like we've said it before, you have a Helles Lager. The ones we had tonight from Jack's Abbey, that one was great. You drink that next to a Helles Lager from Munich, it's going to taste different. It's going to taste different, and they're both well made. But it's something from that water. Even if you're matching the pH, there's more going on there than just that to contribute to what you're drinking, and that's going to be. I don't know if how you. There's so many like secondary and tertiary factors to what's actually in that water to try and like rebuild that from scratch with just salts and not and some lactic acid, I think it's going to be impossible. There's almost something about the terroir of that water that is not capturable and reproducible in some kind of lab setting. And I think it should be that way. But again, like they're both great. It's just going to be let the difference exist and kind of celebrate that. But yeah, you don't want to be like making that water that they're drinking out of the tap because it's not going to be what they brewed with. It's just not going to.
So it
Right,
would be kind of vain of me to just go to Neshaminy Creek and grab
right,
some water and think I
right.
can recreate
Exactly.
that
That's
IPA,
exactly right.
because
Right. If
Neshaminy
you're
Creek is modifying that
exactly.
water once it gets to the brewery.
Yep, exactly correct. Same with yep, and then that kind of extrapolates into any brewery. It's in a city that that is pulling city water that's chlorine in it. What they're doing to make that even brewable is like a whole other process that So exactly, it's again, it's very exciting, but it's just this piece of this puzzle and gets romanticized a lot and unnecessarily so. You get bogged down in it. Although water chemistry is kind of fascinating, but
Okay, so here's something a little tangential, and I think this is kind of this for me was thought provoking though, and it
yeah.
made me wonder why it hasn't happened quite yet. But I expect you'll have a good answer. Um, so aside from water, right? If we just remove this and assume that liquid is necessary in a beer, what would happen if I decided I was going to make a lager with like chicken stock or apple juice or something?
Those things are still mostly water. So for covering most of the planet, water is pretty sneaky. It's kind of in a lot of things. So, and I brewed, and I say in air quotes brewed a well-known homebrew recipe with my college roommates called Ed Wart's Appelweisen, which is or Applevine. It's a German style apple wine. So I did this with apple juice, and that's all the recipe was like 5 gallons of unpasteurized apple juice. I think it was a pound of sugar. It may have been more than that, just like white sugar, and then champagne yeast. Put it in a bucket. I didn't even brew it. Dump it
This
all
is
in a
like it's
bucket.
almost like Pruno. This,
Right, exactly, right, exactly. It's bathtub gin, but you put it in a bucket and wait. And like the homebrew forums, this was like all the rage probably 10 or 12 years ago on a lot of the homebrew forums. People were discovering this. Ed Wart I think it was his handle or his name, and the guy who posted about it first. Um, in his recipe, and we made it a couple of years in a row, like right before Thanksgiving, we had a drink on Thanksgiving, and the hangovers were legendary. It's horrible. It's just got off. It tasted great. It would always blow the top off the brewing bucket, because it was so vigorous, the fermentation. And I remember one year we were cut like the idiots, college kids. It would clearly had fermented enough. We cut up a bunch of apples and fruit and stuff and threw it in there to like ferment more. And then I remember just later that night sitting by a fire with the bucket open and like a ladle and like pouring it out into people. It was like a Yule drink, like a whatever, like some kind of weird sangria from some horrible place. But again, like hangovers are god awful. But it's a fun thing to make. It's easy to make. Ready for a mess though. It's gonna blow the top off your brewing bucket. But it's something you like go out and make now. Like anyone could make that easily and start there. But whoo, get
got
ready.
it.
So
Okay.
so again, you can do it. You can make it. You can make anything. You can ferment anything with sugar in it. But yeah, just be careful of the, the results there.
Yeah, I'm excited for I think I don't know if it's episode 18 that we do fermentation coming up, but
Mm,
we'll undoubtedly revisit Ed Wart,
mm.
or an apple juice explosion. So you touched on this before, but for any home brewers listening, I think it's important that we kind of get like, again, I don't want to be super redundant on this, but is just taking beer from my tap, is that going to really harm me at all, or should I get like one of those Amazon reverse osmosis systems or a filter, or like what should be my
Right,
concern for
right.
water as a home brewer?
Sure. I mean, you're starting out and you're worried about it. You think there's some chlorine in your water, or you have well water and it tastes pondy and weird to you. Then just grab a couple jugs of water from your grocery store or whatever. If you're using extract, you're an extract brewer. You can even brew with distilled water. All the minerals that beer needs is in that extract when they make it for you. Whoever's making the extract you're using. So you even use distilled water, which has almost nothing. It's totally stripped, so it has almost nothing in it. To brew with. So yeah, don't worry about it. Tap water should be fine. If you're worried, use bottled water to start with, and yeah, you'll be good to go. I mean, really, it's I brew with all kinds of stuff: well water, city water, tap water, not in a city, bottled water. and had fine results really across the board. It's in the city water is where things can get tricky, but even still, it's like not to the unless the drinks like you're walking through the YMCA when you have a glass of water. I don't think it's going to be the thing that destroys your beer.
Pay attention to your pH, but don't sweat the
Don't
initial.
sweat it.
My wife and by proxy myself are kind of huge coffee nerds, and I remember her telling me just maybe a month ago that like you can't use super pure water in your coffee because it needs some of the minerals to pick up flavor. So she's doing like half osmosis water and half tap water, and I can't tell much of the difference, but that's a good point to hear that it kind of translates to beer, but more importantly, check your pH after the mash.
Yes.
And so last question, something hopefully relatable, maybe not. Are there any bigger commercial brewers you can think of that have gone through maybe great lengths to assure this water quality in their final product? Actually, as I ask, you've kind of touched on the fact that it is important, but anybody you can think of that kind of maybe really is double checking their water, or is this something that maybe is just more common than anybody thinks of?
You're right. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely if you're an operating brewery that you've been doing it for a bit, like you're dialed in. Your water. You have a lab checking it. You're on top of this stuff, and it's because it is very important. But the thing that really kind of when you asked this question, what I thought of first was breweries like Oscar Blues and New Belgium and Stone and Sierra Nevada that have breweries on different coasts of the U.S. Some of them have different breweries around the world, or at least Stone did. They can make the same beer on different coasts, different places that as a drinker, I can't tell if this is brewed in California or it's brewed in North Carolina or Richmond when I drink it. And that is a testament to with different water sources that are different, that start off different. They're similar, but they're different enough where you need to do some adjusting to make the beer in California taste the same as the one in North Carolina. And to be able to do that, that's really impressive. And it kind of shows you that we can. This is something that's water chemistry is not a mystery. It's probably more well covered than even like hop chemistry and hop oils, all that stuff that we're learning a lot about as we dive deep into what the hops can do with how many different breweries use them different ways currently. But yeah, like that's something that's always impressed me. If I could have a Sierra Nevada Pale Ale in San Diego or at my house here and not know what brewery it came from and just not be able to tell. And that's awesome. And it starts with the water and someone building up North Carolina water to taste like water from Chico or wherever their original brewery is.
That I think is probably a great explanation of maybe the water or the source of water or the pH of the original mash will never be listed on an exciting beer label, but without taking those steps, it's unlikely you'll be able to make a really exciting beer. I guess that's the argument to be made for water and its importance in every single beer any of us have ever drank.
Yeah, I'm fortunate that it's for most of the world pretty good and good tasting and accessible and all that good stuff. And if you're a home brewer, don't freak out about it. Relax, have that home brew some beer, grab some bottled water if you're really freaking out about it. To put that on the back burner so you can enjoy the brew day itself. Yeah, for sure.
Definitely.
For sure.
And if you're not a home brewer, become one with me and Harrison soon. If anything, I think it'll help you appreciate more the beers that you drink out and about, or talk about them, or ask questions about them.
Great. It's a good way to make a big mess in your closet. That's for sure.
Yeah, Ed Wart,
Apple
Vines coming through on the homebrew thread. That's it for Beer 101. What do we got coming up on the next episode? 16, Harrison?
That's right, episode 16. We're going to be focusing on yeast as we kind of round out the 4 ingredients that are in every beer. We'll finish up with yeast and be featuring 2 new beers. We're going to announce that early in the Facebook group. So if you're not in there yet, jump into Facebook, find us, the Drinking Socially group. We'll pop in there. We're going to be drinking next episode, so you guys can hopefully drink along with us. And YouTube's always a great resource. If you don't know, we're on there, and these episodes show up a day early. So if you're jonesing to find out what happens next and can't wait another day, YouTube is your Huckleberry. And on Twitter, you can hit us up at That Beer Podcast. And let me know, if I was right or wrong about the Back to the Future statement I made last week, as well as other ridiculous things we've been claiming there. We're really trying to fill out Twitter with some fun stuff. It's been a lot of fun getting on there personally, and then through the podcast Twitter, to just interact with more people about beer and share with a new audience what we're doing and hear what they're thinking and saying. So a lot of fun things happening on Twitter. If you haven't been there yet and checked out at That Beer Podcast, is where you'll find Bringing Socially on the old Twitter. John, what other thoughts? Yeah,
I couldn't agree with that more. I think if you're listening this long into another long episode of Drinking Socially, which is kind of a drawback of Harrison and I working from home and never actually seeing each other, some of this is just us catching up. But if you're listening this far, you're one of my favorite people. I wish we were drinking a beer together, and I mean that because drinking a beer together would mean more people to talk about it with, and that's one of my favorite things. But if you like the show, hit the subscribe button. iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you're listening to this, there's probably a subscribe button. Hit that so that you know when a new episode comes out. And I would say even more importantly, yes, leave a review, because somehow that helps us through computer algorithms and helping other people find the show. But most importantly, Harrison and I started this Twitter just recently, and the only goal of this is to interact more with you. Did you hear something that Harrison was talking about with water or on the malt episode and you're unsure? Hit us up on Twitter, ask a question. You'll get a response. It'll be either me or Harrison that come in there, maybe both of us if it's a tough question. But check that out. If you like the show, let us know. Otherwise, if you have any questions, show notes, links to the beers we drank are going to be available on podcast.untappd.com. And again, hit us up on Twitter, join the Facebook group. We welcome your contributions to the show always.
Yes. Other than that, we will see you in 2 weeks.
Cheers.
Cheers. Yeah.